As you know, we've been in London recently for 2 events, one being the True Crime Awards, where Scottish Murders was shortlisted for Best Indie Podcast. While we didn't win, it was great to even be shortlisted, and we were delighted for Shane from the podcast Foul Play crime series who won in this category. A couple of other highlights of the True Crime Awards was meeting Kevin and Catherine from the Just Thought Lounge on YouTube, who were also shortlisted for an award. The Just Thought Lounge is a true crime channel on YouTube that brings fantastically well put together videos with well balanced cases that will make you think, and are all delivered expertly by Kevin. They cover cases from all over the world, but with me being Scottish, I would highly recommend starting with their David Gilroy and the disappearance of Suzanne Pilley episode. However, whichever episode you start with, you're sure to be captivated. We also were blown away by Quentin, aka Champagne Bubbler, who is a published spoken word artist and poet and triple award-winning youth mentor. And honestly, he is such a lovely and humble guy to speak to. We'd highly recommend checking his videos out, as they are so engaging and impactful. His website is mmapworkshops.co.uk. Another event we attended was CrimeCon, and we were really inspired after attending so many interesting and insightful sessions, such as the Killed Abroad session, which focused on the cases of Kirsty Maxwell and Craig Mallon, cases which we plan to cover in the near future, with the session being hosted by David Swindle, who was joined by Kirsty's dad, Brian, and Kirsty's best friend. We also attended the sessions Mass Shooters Myth Busted with Sarah and Catherine, who are the hosts of the excellent podcast Stop the Killing. Also, the Great Train Robbery session, where we heard from Nick Reynolds, who is the son of Bruce Reynolds, who was the brains behind the Great Train Robbery. And the session about the 2005 London bombings, which was hosted by my mate Stu from British Murders. Stu was so chilled out before and during this session, I would have been a nervous wreck, which is why Stu was doing this session and I was sat in the audience. While all of the sessions that we attended during the CrimeCon weekend were excellent in their own way, the one that stuck out and really got me thinking was called The Colour of Missing, which was hosted by Eric from the award-winning podcast True Consequences, who was joined by Jane from the Missing People charity and Evidence Joel, whose 19-year-old son Richard went missing in London before his body was found 12 days later. According to the Missing People charity, they are the only UK charity dedicated to reconnecting missing people and their loved ones, and offering support to people affected by a disappearance, with someone being reported missing every 90 seconds in the UK. Until Evidence's son Richard went missing, she had no reason to be aware of the Missing People charity, no reason to even think that if the unthinkable ever happened and any of her loved ones went missing, that she wouldn't receive a full and immediate response from the police. Sadly, that was not Evidence's experience. Although Richard was 19 years old and an adult, he had sickle cell disease and would regularly require blood transfusions. At the time of his disappearance, due to his disease and COVID, he'd been shielding and studying at home, barely leaving the house, and mainly only leaving the house to go to the hospital for his blood transfusions. And so, when Evidence came home from her night shift working as a nurse to find her son not in his room, she immediately began to worry. She remembered, however, that before she left for work, Richard had told her that he was going to see a friend, and so Evidence contacted this friend, only to be told that Richard was not there. It was so out of character for Richard just to vanish, and so this fact, coupled with the fact he had a medical condition, Evidence called the police to report her son missing. Sadly, though, Evidence was not taken seriously, being told, according to mylondon.news, that it would take 6 days for the case to be considered high risk, as Richard was an adult who could come and go as he pleased. Each time Evidence would call the police to ask for an update or to state yet again this was out of character for Richard and that due to this and his illness, his disappearance should be treated as high risk, she felt the police thought, according to the Mirror newspaper, that she was just being frantic or had nothing better to do, and therefore no CCTV footage was sought or checked to see if Richard could be located. It wouldn't be until Richard's case had caught the attention of the local and national press, and upon evidence contacting her local MP, that finally Richard's case was moved up the police's list of priorities. But it was too late. 12 days after being reported missing, Richard's body was found in a lake in Epping Forest, located about 21 miles or 34 kilometres from his home. Richard's cause of death has never been determined, but police stated before carrying out an investigation that there was no proof that a third party was involved. At the time of CrimeCon, evidence was waiting for the results of a third inquest into the circumstances surrounding Richard's death, and so she was unable to say too much about her son's death and the investigation into his death. Evidence is still left with many unanswered questions, but she believes her son was lured there, into the dark Epping Forest, and she believes that the authorities have not investigated Richard's death adequately. The many unanswered questions the evidence has continue to torment her. According to mylondon.news, evidence feels that Richard was treated differently by the police because of his race. And following becoming involved with the Missing People charity, she has found out that she most definitely is not alone in experiencing this. 2 members of the Metropolitan Police were served with misconduct notices due to the way that Richard's case was initially handled, and the Independent Office for Police Conduct, the IOPC, are investigating complaints from evidence around the way she was initially treated by police officers when she reported her 19-year-old son, Richard, missing. So after hearing evidence's experience with the police following her son going missing and evidence being left with so many unanswered questions, I wondered if there were other missing people cases where race inequality had impacted an investigation that involved Scotland somehow, and I came across the case of Saima Ahmed. On Saturday, the 9th of January 2016, human remains were found at the edge of Gogarburn Golf Course in Edinburgh. Following specialist forensic techniques being used to identify the remains, including DNA analysis, it was finally revealed on Thursday the 25th of February 2016 that the remains were that of 36-year-old Saima Ahmed, who had been reported missing by her family in August 2015. However, far from giving Saima's family answers as to what had happened to her, the revelation that Saima's remains had been found 400 miles or 644 kilometres away from her home in Wembley in London, and following extensive forensic work and toxicology reports, due to the passage of time and the effects of the elements and nature, Saima's cause of death could not be ascertained. It only added to her family's confusion as to why Saima's remains had been found in Edinburgh and what had happened to her. Saima Ahmed was a 36-year-old librarian who lived in the Wembley area of London with her parents and brother Sadat. Saima had previously been married but had since divorced and had moved back in with her family. On Sunday, the 30th of August at 8:30 a.m, Saima left her family home and never returned. With it being completely out of character for Saima not to return home or to call and let her parents know where she was, her family reported Saima missing the next day, Monday the 31st of August. However, Saima's disappearance was treated as low risk, despite the family explaining that Saima would never just disappear without telling her family where she was, and that this alone suggested something was amiss. As Metropolitan Police officers continued to treat Saima's disappearance as low risk, this meant that no investigation was carried out and that CCTV footage was not gathered to try and find out Saima's movements, to try and find out where she may be and if she may have needed help. And so Saima's family were left with not knowing what happened to Saima, were left to wonder if she needed their help, were left to wonder what they could possibly do to try and find her themselves, were left to wonder and think the unimaginable. And then, after 6 months of thinking the worst, despite the police categorising Saima's disappearance as low risk, the absolute worst happened. Saima's remains were found at the edge of a golf course in Edinburgh. But this devastating news didn't give Saima's family any peace or closure. It only brought more questions. Why was Saima in Edinburgh? There was no family or extended family living in or near Edinburgh, and Saima didn't have any friends living in the area. So how and why had Saima's remains been found in Edinburgh? Well, this is when CCTV footage would have come in handy. Police would have been able to track Saima's movements and maybe see if she had been with anyone. However, as this was now 6 months later and Saima's uncharacteristic disappearance had been categorised as low risk, much of the CCTV footage that would have been useful in this investigation, had Saima's disappearance been investigated by the Metropolitan Police at the time of her disappearance, was now no longer available. The only CCTV footage that was available to Police Scotland in their investigation, which was led by Detective Chief Inspector Martin McLean from Edinburgh CID to try and piece together Saima's movements, was of Saima entering Wembley Central Station and boarding a train to Watford Junction, and she appeared to be alone. Where she went after that was just guesswork, although a train ticket from Birmingham to Edinburgh had been found near Saima's remains, and Police Scotland believe Saima had bought this ticket at Birmingham about 5 p.m. on Sunday the 30th of August 2015, the day her family last saw her. It was also established that Saima had withdrawn money from a cash machine at Wembley Central Station before she boarded the train to Watford. At the time Saima's remains were identified, an appeal was made for anyone to come forward if they had seen or spoken to Saima on her journey to Edinburgh or upon her arrival in Edinburgh. Saima was described as being an Asian female, around 5 foot 5 inches or 1.65 metres tall, of medium build with shoulder-length straight dark hair, and she had last been seen wearing a dark long V-neck top, black trousers, black shoes and a black jacket. And so despite not having much to work with, given the lapse in time, following an extensive investigation and Police Scotland receiving a small number of calls from the public with information, Police Scotland believed that following Saima arriving at Watford Station, she had then boarded the 11:06 a.m. train to Birmingham, which called at Hemel Hempstead and Northampton before arriving in Birmingham, where she then bought a train ticket and boarded the Birmingham to Edinburgh train about 5:15 p.m, and she would have arrived at Edinburgh Waverley train station at about 10:22 p.m, and it was believed that Saima had died shortly after arriving in Edinburgh. However, a man who had been walking his dog, possibly on Monday the 31st of August, around about 10:30 a.m, although he was not 100% sure of the date, on Portobello Beach, which is about 28 minutes southeast of Edinburgh Waverley train station, he spoke to a woman matching Saima's description, saying that she was alone. He said that this woman told him that she'd wanted to see the beach, but that she planned to travel back to London later the same day. Upon receiving this information, Police Scotland made a further appeal to guest houses in the area where this woman could possibly have stayed overnight, as well as taxi drivers, bus drivers, tram drivers, private car drivers, anyone who may have either seen or transported this woman, possibly being Saima, to Portobello Beach. DCI Martin McLean also stated that while there was no evidence of a crime having been committed, he was not completely ruling out criminality. However, despite the appeals that Police Scotland were making for anyone who had seen or spoken to a female matching the description given to contact the police, only a small amount of calls were actually received, which again, due to the passage of time, was challenging for Police Scotland. And so almost a year after Saima left her family home and never returned, her family and Police Scotland still had no answers as to why Saima had travelled to Edinburgh. Each year in August is the Edinburgh Fringe, and so at the time Saima had travelled to Edinburgh, there would have been thousands of visitors there for the festival. And if Saima's disappearance had been taken seriously at the time she went missing, there might have been a chance that someone holidaying in Edinburgh may have seen Saima and could have held a vital piece to the mystery, or helped take the investigation in another direction. However, as it wasn't until 6 months after this that Saima's remains were identified, this likely led to so few people phoning in to give information to the police. And so on the 30th of August 2016, exactly a year after Saima's disappearance, leaflets were being handed out by police in Wembley and at Wembley train station, which was the area where Saima had lived, as well as at Hemel Hempstead, Birmingham, Waverley train station in Edinburgh and other areas in Edinburgh, in the hope that the same people who had been at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival the year before were also at it in 2016, and it might jog their memory about seeing or speaking to Saima, or they may have vital information that could assist in Police Scotland's investigation. However, despite Saima's brother Sadat saying in an article in the Edinburgh News in August 2020 that Saima was very inquisitive, and as she was in Edinburgh for the first time, she would have asked questions, she would have spoken to someone, sadly the poster distribution didn't lead to further lines of inquiry. Despite Saima's brother Sadat returning to Edinburgh in 2020, 5 years after his sister went missing, to make another appeal alongside DCI Martin McLean, and despite Police Scotland carrying out a thorough and extensive investigation until all lines of inquiry had been followed up, as I record this in June 2023, Saima's family still do not know why Saima went to Edinburgh, a place she had never been before and had no connection with. They still do not know if she went there alone or with someone. They do not know how she got to Gogarburn Golf Course, which is located 40 minutes west of Edinburgh Waverley train station, and they still do not know how she died. They are confused, grieving, and while Police Scotland and DCI Martin McLean have done their very best to piece together Saima's movements, the family feel let down by the Metropolitan Police for not taking Saima's disappearance seriously enough to ensure that vital CCTV footage and witnesses could be sought at the time, which could possibly have helped Saima's family have the much-needed answers to their many questions. Upon remains being found at Gogarburn Golf Course on the 9th of January 2016, but before they were identified as being Saima in February 2016, the Met Police Directorate of Professional Standards referred the Metropolitan Police to the police watchdog, the Independent Police Complaints Commission, following the Ahmed family criticising the response and how the family were dealt with following them reporting Saima as missing. In August 2016, it was confirmed, according to an article in the BBC News, that 5 Metropolitan Police officers had been notified they were under investigation, 2 for gross misconduct and 3 for misconduct, over the way they handled information and conducted the investigation, with it being reported in an article in the BBC News in July 2017 that it was felt that the acting DCI had a case to answer for misconduct, as, in the Independent Police Complaint Commission's opinion, he failed to document his reasons for not following up the leads for Saima's last known sightings, which may have breached professional standards. However, according to a BBC News article in August 2020, a misconduct meeting in December 2017 for the acting Detective Chief Inspector found allegations of misconduct as not proven. 2 constables were given management advice by way of unsatisfactory performance procedures, and no case to answer was found against the 2 remaining officers under investigation. Despite the Metropolitan Police letting down both Saima and her family, Saima's brother Sadat said in a BBC article in August 2016 that, "I have faith in the police." And for an article for Sky News also in August 2016, he said that both the Scottish and the Met Police are doing everything they can. Sadat said of his sister that she was a loving and caring person, that they were a close family, and that the passage of time has done little to ease the family's pain. I can't imagine if facing the trauma, the panic of a loved one going missing, having then also to contend with not being taken seriously, or your loved one's disappearance not being taken seriously because of race. Like Evidence, it's not something I had thought about, but it certainly was an eye-opener listening to Evidence's plight at CrimeCon. Sadly, it appears there is still some way to go before all missing people and their families are treated equally. Like I said, the sessions at CrimeCon London were really interesting and very eye-opening. It was also great having a table among so many other podcasters, some we'd met before, as well as others we met for the first time. However, the best part of the whole weekend was meeting you, our listeners, so thank you for coming to say hello. We also met some people who hadn't heard about the podcast but were keen to listen and even suggested some cases they'd like us to cover, which we plan on doing over the next few months, and we'll give you a shout out when we do. We'd also like to announce that we have a new Patreon member, Alexandria. We really appreciate you, Alexandria. Thank you so much for your support. It means so much to us. If you would like to support us too, there are a few ways you can do this. You can become a Patreon member along with Misty Dondi Cray and Alexandria by visiting patreon.com/scottishmurders. You can like and share our posts on social media so others can find Scottish Murders too, or you can leave us a rating and review on your favoured platform. Now, we did receive a review recently on Apple Podcasts by Oracle0_4, who said that they had loved catching up with our back catalogue of episodes and would like to have heard more, but that they were sad to hear that Scottish Murders was coming to an end. Imagine my surprise to find this out. So I just wanted to assure Oracle0_4 and anyone else who thought that Scottish Murders was coming to an end that no, we have absolutely no plans to come to an end, and we hope to be around for quite some time yet. So we hope you continue to enjoy listening to our episodes. And that's it. We'll be back with our usual episodes on the 4th of July, where we'll continue with listener request episodes.
Scottish Murders is a production of Clurin Ton.